It is Saturday, September 29th, 2018. Thank you all for tuning into the Sneed Mobile Tech Patreon page. What I have for you guys today is some news coming out of Verizon and AT&T. There are a couple of pieces coming from each company, so I'll go ahead and go through each of those. I'll start with Verizon, and then I'll go ahead and end with AT&T. Now, there is a second part to this update, which I will drop tomorrow on Sunday. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and group everything coming from T-Mobile and Sprint together, as they are pretty much engaged to be married. But so that's kind of how I'll do that. So you guys can look forward to that. I'll drop it at some point tomorrow, maybe Sunday in the afternoon. So I'll go ahead and start with Verizon. Verizon is actually beginning to push the 4G LTE limits. So there are reports coming out of New York City. Verizon is doing some nice things with 4G LTE. Now, specifically, they've achieved 1.4 gigabits per second on their 4G LTE network in that particular region. They did so with the help of Nokia and Qualcomm in partnership. And actually, I find it kind of interesting that this was actually noteworthy and buzzworthy. So everything recently has been about 5G, but this in particular about 4G LTE. So the way that they actually achieved this LTE speed was by using 6 carrier aggregation. I think specifically they did cite that they were using 4 carriers of unlicensed LAA spectrum. One was a PCS carrier and the other AWS. So the device being used was using a processor that contained the X24 LTE modem from Qualcomm. This is what is considered to be a 4.9G chip, just basically meaning it's kind of like the precursor to 5G chips, which we're expecting the Snapdragon X50 to be coming out next year, that will be 5G LTE compatible. Along with those particular carrier aggregation methods, they also were using 256 QAMs and 4x4 MIMO to achieve the speeds. In terms of the antenna tech that they were utilizing, this is pretty much standard. I think Verizon's got over 1,100 sites, tower sites, that actually have these antennas, so this is not something rare. But I think this particular story in particular is just kind of a reminder that we still have room for improvement when it comes to 4G LTE. It's not done, it's not reached its peak performance in terms of its potential. So theoretical top speeds have yet to truly be tapped out. So before we get to 5G, of course, there are going to be 4G LTE improvements. And you know, even with 5G, when it comes to the new generation networks, 4G LTE is still going to be the backbone and the framework for 5G networks. It's the fundamental technology that's going to be anchoring future 5G networks. So this is excellent for Verizon users. I think it shows great speed and capacity of their network, especially in that specific market in New York City where they really could probably use that support. And hopefully there are more markets to come, so I'll keep you guys updated on that if we hear about more of these types of network enhancements in other areas. Next thing that I want to do is update an older topic. Verizon, which for those of you that have followed the channel for a while, you know that they have this MVNO that they're kind of conducting, this company called Visible. Now, Visible is by definition an MVNO, but it is owned and operated by Verizon, so it's not like a separate company. It's just, you know, kind of like a chapter within the book of Verizon. So what they've done now is the service is now completely open to all customers. There is no code or invite needed to join the network. So yeah, this is one of the restrictions that the company previously had on the deployment of the launching of the network. So for those of you that are unaware, all functionality, all orders, all customer care requirements and needs is done through the Visible application. So there's no like brick and mortar store. You don't go into Verizon and seek out, you know, Visible customer care. It's not going to work like that. So everything through the app. I mean, you can't even call them. Everything has to be done through the application. So what you're getting with this particular service, you're getting unlimited talk and text. You're getting unlimited LTE data and also unlimited hotspot data, tethering data, all for the cost of $40 per month. The only restriction in terms of the LTE is that it is throttled to 5 megabits per second. on the LTE. Now we do see that now we have like open customer enrollment. Anybody can join the service, but there still is the restriction as it was before. It has to be on an iPhone. Specifically, it has to be an iPhone 6 or newer. So iPhone 6, 6 Plus, 6S, SE, 7, 7 Plus, 8, 8 Plus, 10. I'm assuming 10s Max and 10s as well. So, and of course the iPhone XR when it comes out. That's pretty much what you're restricted to. So the device must be unlocked and it must be compatible with the Verizon network. So if it's been activated with a carrier previously, it has to be unlocked. Now in terms of payment, that $40 per month, you can pay using Venmo or PayPal. Obviously this is a company that is operating through an application. That would be your form of payment there. Now in terms of what this plan means for the consumer, I think it's a pretty attractive price point, $40 per month. I feel like the LTE Unlimited is actually not bad. It's not fast by any means, but it should get you 720p video resolution, if you were so inclined to need that. I don't know. There are some trade-offs, but the deal is good, and you are getting Verizon's coverage, which Verizon has A+ coverage nationwide. So there's a lot of value there. There's a lot to like there, but there are some restrictions. And you guys can kind of tell me what you think about this deal and what your perception is of this particular MVNO of Verizon. All right, moving on from Verizon, let's slide over to AT&T news. AT&T's MVNO Cricket, which is owned and operated by AT&T, has officially lifted and removed the 8 megabits per second LTE data throttle limit on the $60 unlimited plan. I'm sure some of you may possibly have this plan out there. It is kind of a big deal. I feel like this is kind of good for customers. The plan does have a $5 auto pay discount, so the $60 would receive a $5 discount, would put it at $55 per month. Temporarily, a slowing of data speeds is still in effect, so while they have lifted the 8 megabit per second limit, they still do retain that little caveat that if the network does get bogged down a bit, they're going to slow people down to help deal with that congestion temporarily. Also keep in mind that this plan has a 480p video resolution restriction. Now the $55 per month unlimited plan, which is set at a 3 megabits per second data LTE throttle, that's still in effect. All other plans are at 8 megabits per second. So this is the only plan that does see the change. So I think this is kind of interesting. You think about the timing. Earlier in the week, we had the rebrand from Metro. So from Metro PCS to Metro by T-Mobile. And then they had kind of like an adjustment to their data plans. So they changed their $50 and $60 data plans, and they added some features there with the Google storage as well as the Amazon Prime membership. So this is awesome. This clearly shows that AT&T is responding through Cricket, its prepaid side, to kind of respond to what T-Mobile did earlier in the week. So I think this is pretty much wireless competition at its finest, at its core, and of course this is good news for us as consumers. So that's what's going on there with Cricket. All right, next piece of news coming from AT&T. This as pertains to rural customers. AT&T is ready to provide fixed wireless internet to roll out to 18 states nationwide. So the goal is to hit 1.1 million rural customers in the U.S., and it looks like AT&T is set to get about 660,000 customers connected to the service by the end of this year. Now, in terms of the states that are going to have this, the 18 states: Alabama, Arkansas, California, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Wisconsin. We're all included in this report. So this is good to see, obviously, for rural Americans, giving them some choices, giving them some internet. They're obviously very, very underserved, very underrepresented. It's the minority population. Obviously, people don't live out in the rural area in terms of dense populations like in cities. So these people are definitely underserved and underrepresented. But it obviously is a future segment that could be very important politically as it pertains to, 5G networks and the T-Mobile and Sprint merger. So there is a lot riding on stuff like this. So it's good to see the implications for rural Americans in this. All right, the last item from AT&T, and of course the last item from this particular video, the Big Blue carrier is going to start refarming low-band spectrum at some point this year and going into next year. Now, pretty much they're just going to be refarming this because they need the spectrum allocations for their 5G network build. Obviously, they need to be able to anchor their 5G networks, and whatever low-frequency, low-band spectrum they have will be utilized for that purpose. So we're probably talking like 600 megahertz, 700 megahertz allocations here. AT&T has cited their need to anchor the 5G millimeter wave spectrum that they're going to be using. So they need some bridging of those technologies. Keep in mind that long-range, long-distance transmission is a real issue with 5G networks as it pertains to those really, really high wave spectrums. So like millimeter wave, the 38, 39 gigahertz bands. You just can't get building penetration with those types of bands. It's really difficult. The propagation's a challenge. Penetrating through walls and other obstacles and barriers is very challenging. So those issues are well documented, and most people know about that. So addressing this issue using the low band frequencies could definitely bolster and help AT&T quite a bit. Now, AT&T does have a lot of spectrum in their portfolio. They have tons of assets, so it shouldn't really be an issue once they get this refarmed. So obviously they've got 700 megahertz, 600 megahertz. They've got WCS holdings, millimeter wave, obviously, for the capacity and the speeds for 5G. They also have the first responders contract where they got a lot of spectrum there to build that network out. So in terms of 5G progress, now we kind of have some news coming out of AT&T. They've already started the deployment of their hardware. The radios are out there, the transmission components are there. Now it's simply just a point to where AT&T needs to see devices that are 5G compatible. So, we're waiting on Qualcomm and other chip makers to provide the hardware to take advantage of these networks. So yeah, it's good to get an update on that. The spectrum obviously is going to become a pretty premium issue. We're going to have 2 spectrum auctions here in the next 10 months, so we're looking forward to that. Now, Verizon and other carriers are doing the same thing as AT&T. Verizon's going to be shutting down its 3G networks pretty soon. I want to say next year at some point. So they're done activating 3G phones, and they're going to have to get people out of those legacy devices and into some 4G LTE phones so they can shut that down, refarm that 3G spectrum, and get it towards 5G networks. So, that's going to be what a lot of the carriers are doing over the course of the next year or two. So yeah, we've got some exciting news there from AT&T with 5G development. Good news if you are a Cricket customer, you've got the $60 plan seeing the lift of the 8 megabits per second restriction. For those of you interested in that Verizon Visible company open enrollment, if you have the iPhone 6 or newer, you can now enroll into that deal. And Verizon boasting 4G LTE speeds and real-world network usage in New York City, seeing 1.5 gigs per second. So all of that happening there. So any of the topics that I covered in today's video, if you guys would like to chime in on that, drop me some comments. Go ahead and do so in the Patreon page or here in this video. However you guys want to do it, it's fine with me. Give me your thoughts and opinions on any topics covered here. So that's it for this one. Part 2 of this video series is coming out tomorrow. I'll talk about all things going on with the merger, specifically anything that as it pertains to T-Mobile and Sprint. And yeah, we'll cover all that tomorrow. So look forward to that. Make sure you stay tuned to the Patreon page. I'll go ahead and update those links at some point tomorrow. I think I'll do so in the afternoon. So thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great rest of the weekend, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.